now.
So, hello everyone. My name is Alistair, and with me is Mun-Wai. And in this session, what we're going to be doing is looking at a case study that came about when Mun-Wai was working at a global telecoms company. I know that this event has been going on now since the early hours of this morning for some folks. Speaking to somebody in Houston who was up at 5 a.m. to make sure that she was capturing all the right things. It is currently 6 p.m. UK time and 10 a.m. San Francisco, which is where Mun-Wai is coming from. So the reason we wanted to go through this is when I first heard this story, I was very, very keen to get this out to as many people as possible. I think it's proof that there is a better and far simpler way to deliver Agile adoption. So Mun-Wai, you were brought in to head up the program management of the product development organization. And this made up about a third of the whole company. And your main role there was enabling teams to get products out the door. But as happens so often with highly competent agilists such as yourself, you got landed with another problem to solve at the same time. Would you like to introduce that, that challenge that you were given?
Thank you, Alistair, for the introduction. Perhaps let me start from the beginning. So here I am, I'm trying to figure out how to minimize the travel expense while the company has this new corporate travel provider. Now, we were told that we would all use the corporate travel provider so that as a company, the more the travelers book through the corporate provider, the more discount the company gets as a whole. However, the corporate provider is more expensive than the travel agencies that we have been using, and we have a budget to adhere to. Going with the corporate provider means less travel for us or risk going over the budget. As a product development organization, the travels are necessary to work on projects together with global offices, and it is not optional. So the executive vice president of product development got beat up by finance every quarter about going over the travel budget while we saved money on other things. Now, of course, when the executive VP got beat up, she immediately let me know and told me to handle it. You can imagine how frustrated I was when we went over budget because we followed the new corporate travel guidelines. As far as I'm concerned, we're being good corporate citizens, and yet we're being dinged by it. Moreover, I now had to make time out to deal with corporate policies that make no sense to me, while the real work of enabling teams to get product out the door was being put aside.
So this is not an unusual situation, I think, for most of us who have worked and continue to work in corporate, having these competing challenges. And all this was happening whilst you were in the middle of what your main focus was. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about what was going on there?
Yes. So at the same time, I was changing the way performance assessment were done within the product development organization to encourage team collaboration instead of highlighting individual achievements. This is part of my effort of enabling teams to get product out the door. My executive VP and I were doing this on our own without HR's knowledge or involvement. We translated what we did to HR's existing annual processes. With performance assessment comes reward and recognition ties directly to finance, specifically another budget line item. Oh, great. Now I had two budget line items to deal with to ensure neither of them go over budget. I thought, we're a responsible organization. We may have to spend more in one area, but we make sure we decrease our spend in other areas. So why am I dealing with one line item at a time? That's just stupid. It makes no sense to me.
And so often the policies that we have seem to make no sense. Sometimes when we clarify them, obviously they do, but so often they don't. But they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And faced with this growing problem and your mounting frustration, your brain did what we know human brains do, and you came up with a solution. Tell us what you did.
Well, since I was tracking all the expenses in the product development organization anyway, I thought, what if the executive VP of product development has one big budget and let her use it however she wants instead of worrying one line item at a time? So I discussed my idea with the executive VP, and she was all for trying it out, as long as I promised to track everything for her and let her know what trade-offs she needed to make in order to balance her overall budget. We still manage a budget, but managing is easy when you don't get dinged for every single line item, as long as you balance the overall budget. Now, of course, by everything, she meant everything, which included payroll, taxes, capex, opex, real estate, everything. So travel expenses and reward and incentives were part of the everything.
So that sounds like a really great solution, a really great idea. But I'm just curious, how did finance react to this? How did you get their buy-in?
Interesting that you asked that. I was actually tasked to convince the finance department to let us try. I asked the CFO if he trusted the executive VPs, that is, the people who directly reported to the CEO. He said, of course. I then said, wonderful. So you should trust them, or at least just the executive VP of product development, my boss, with the budget, right? Meaning you would think that she should know how to balance a budget, right? Now, the CFO, having no idea where this was coming from, said, oh, yes, I expect that she knows how to balance a budget. So I said, well, then, would you mind just giving her one big budget number to manage instead of scrutinizing every single line item on the budget? Oh, and by the way, since you expect her to be able to balance a budget, you can ding her when she doesn't. What do you say? Can we try that quarter by quarter? The CFO was speechless at that point and grudgingly agreed since he had no good arguments to counter me. He also allowed us to book travels using whichever agency we'd like and stay in whatever hotels we'd like, as long as we didn't go over the overall budget. He told me not to tell other departments because the company was still trying to institute this new corporate travel policy. He encouraged us to use the corporate provider if it cost the same as other agencies. I promised him that we would also get quotes from the corporate provider and would submit the evidence when we submitted our travel expense reports every time we didn't use the corporate provider. That way he could explain it to the travel folks. He agreed, and that's what I told the team to do. And if they get hassle from the travel folks, well, tell the travel folks to come to me. Yay, freedom! Not only do we not need to penny pinch every single line item, we didn't have to adhere to the corporate policies that don't make sense. Oh, how those travel folks hated me. However, the CFO did bring up a good point. For accounting purposes, some of those line items would still remain because it's what the company wants to track. So for travel, it's an expense that most companies want to track. Hence, it'll still be a line item on the budget. I'll tell you later how we satisfy the accounting need of tracking specific line items while doing our experiment.
Brilliant. So it was having conversations and using pure logic that got you to where you got to. So you see that you're creating progress. And now you've got a quarter to prove your point, with obviously the acceptable conditions to satisfy finance. So how did you keep track of everything? Because how did you avoid staying within budget? What did you have an approach for that?
So how did I track all of these expenses, you ask?
Mm.
Well, I made it transparent. To a certain degree. First, it's only within the product development organization, which includes product management, user experience, engineering, operations, etc., but not to the entire company. And second, the executive VP just shuddered when thinking about any individuals knowing all the numbers. I understood her concerns and suggested making the numbers transparent to only her direct reports, the VPs, and theirs, the directors. I asked her, isn't that part of the job that your direct reports to VPs and theirs, the directors, are expected to be able to manage their own group's budget? So the VPs and the directors should have visibility into their own group's budget. She agreed. I further pressed on and convinced her that other than the first line managers, all other managers should also have the visibility into their own group's expenses, because that would be a good training ground for them, as this is an expected responsibility when they get promoted one day. She agreed as well.
So as we can hear, you're continually using some really fundamental Agile principles. In this case, transparency and joint ownership of things. And again, I love the fact that you're constantly looking for that win-win. You use logic to point out the additional benefits and the approach that you proposed. So could you just walk us through what that looked like in practice?
So again, I started with travel. I made a spreadsheet to track travel information. For example, who requested to travel, why they want to travel, when, and how much. The managers and individuals who fill out the spreadsheet at the end of each quarter for the following quarter, then they bring all the requests to the directors. Now, the directors will then ask the managers questions like, so 3 of your engineers also asked to upgrade the computers because they said it has been 5 years. So are the travel requests more important than the computer upgrades? Why or why not? That taught the managers how to manage the budget, how to do trade-offs, and what questions they would ask in order to be able to make trade-off decisions. Now, this way, the executive VP doesn't need to handle every single request by herself because that's not scalable. Now, of course, not every director can balance his or her budget every quarter. So they horse trade among themselves without having to involve their VPs or senior VPs every single time.
Brilliant. So this sounds like a lot like the approach Dave Marquet talks about when he was commander of the Santa Fe submarine in his book Turn the Ship Around. Yeah, you and your EVP were moving the decision making and the responsibility down through the organization. So I'm just curious as to how did the teams react to this?
Well, while we were doing this experiment, I saw changes in the entire product development organization. A lot of creativity and camaraderie. In fact, the directors became a close-knit group. They became more collaborative with each other instead of trying to protect their own turf. People in the team start to see the budget as their money instead of company money that they would lose if they don't use it. So with this new way of tracking and questioning and thinking through the various money requests, people are now more conscientious of the spending asks. They figure out creative ways to achieve the same purpose without spending as much. They also actively research and share ideas with each other into cheaper deals because they know if they can save money in one area, they have more money to spend in another area. So for example, the executive VP and the CTO don't expose their budget to me because they are executives, and this is an experiment. They're not used to being questioned about their expenses, even by the CEO, so they're not part of the transparent group, though I could calculate it and budget them in. However, because the CTO travels quite a bit, the engineers are not happy that he's spending their money. The CTO then reviews that he has ways to travel in style while paying economy fare. So now the entire product development organization follows his lead. We start to travel in style while still under budget.
Brilliant. So what we're seeing is we've got curiosity, we've got conversations, we've got experimentation, and of course the transparency, creating the sense of ownership, which is then unleashing creativity. It just feels like it's agile supercharged. Do you have any examples of how people change their behaviors? And in particular, was there any impact on the EVP's behavior?
Well, good question. So let me give you another example. When I gave the EVP a number of trade-offs, she asked me if I budgeted her travel in and how much I budgeted. Then she asked me how much a typical engineer spends in their travel. She realized that her one trip can pay for 3 to 4 trips by any engineer. So she decided that the engineers need to travel a lot more than she does. So she willingly did not travel for an entire quarter. Now, when we repeated the trade-off discussion the following quarter, she made the same decision. In fact, she abstained from traveling for a total of 18 months. Now, during those 18 months, she, with the help of HRBP, the HR business partner, figured out how to achieve her traveling purpose without leaving her office. She explained to her team why she made that decision and what she hoped to achieve with that decision. That is, where she wants to see the money being spent instead, which are all to her organization's benefit. Her organization became very appreciative.
So everything that you did was building trust. It was strengthening the relationships up and down the department. Did that have any impact on the wider organization? Has anything else start to change?
Well, after 18 months, the CEO told her that in her position, the executive VP has to travel to the various global offices that we had. So she told her team, the entire product development organization, that she has to travel after 18 months of not traveling. Now, everyone understood and no one was resentful. However, she's now more aware of what her traveling means. That is, she understands the trade-off that is made in order for her to travel. So she became more open. Now, she still didn't expose all of her travel expenses, but she tried different hotels and found hotels that live up to her standard and don't break the bank. She shared her hotel tips and encouraged her team to try those hotels. Now, the entire team got excited, especially the engineers, because they felt privileged that they are encouraged to stay in executive style hotels. She also shared with the team the good eateries that she found in various locations. And in turn, when any individuals found good deals, that is, good hotels, good rooms, good price, good eats, they share these information not just among themselves, but also with the executive VP. And of course, they share stories of their experiences with one another as well. It builds camaraderie with the entire organization, including the EVP.
I mean, again, as we mentioned at the beginning, this is, Agile absolutely coming to life. It just sounds absolutely brilliant. But I'm sure that we want to know is, were there any downsides? For example, did anyone take advantage of the situation? And if so, how was that policed?
So you were wondering if there were anyone taking advantage of this no budget experiment?
Mm.
Oh, yes, there were.
Mm.
And how do I stop that? Well, I don't, because there will always be people taking advantage. However, that's far and few between. And the impact of people taking advantage is far less than the benefit that are outlined. Also, their peers would have realized that they have been taken advantage of after the fact. And self-policing is a strong motive for someone to go the straight and narrow next time around. For example, one time after someone took advantage of their travel and needed to upgrade their work machine, the teammate said, "I think you used up your machine money in your hotel stay, buddy." Ouch.
Really interesting. Thank you. And of course, we've got to remember that in all of this, your main job still is dealing with team collaboration, and in particular, the impact of HR's policy were having. So what happened to that? Were there any synergies between this little project that you were doing and the wider work that you had to do?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, part of my effort of enabling teams to get products out the door is to encourage more team collaboration instead of highlighting individual achievements. The factors that would hinder team collaboration lie in how performance is being assessed and how rewards and incentives are given. People naturally would do what gives them better performance reviews and bigger bonuses or salary rises. So rewards and incentive used to be another line item on the budget, and things like offsites, team building events are yet another line item. Now, even though we're no longer tracking line by line, we still need to have some line items to satisfy accounting needs. Since we're changing the way reward and recognition is done under the noses of HR, we got creative in our budget and created a big bucket that encompasses rewards, bonuses, incentives, offsites, team building, etc. I don't remember exactly what I called it, but it's something along the line of team efficiency. Since the company is all about increasing efficiency, I told them that to increase efficiency, well, it takes money. So they never questioned the need of that line item. They did ask what team efficiency entails. And I told them, it's our secret sauce that only people in the product development organization knows. They are not in the product development organization. So I'm sorry, I cannot share with you. Now, we did leave the salary rises to a separate budget line item since that is to be expected. And the company wants to know who is getting what percentage rises anyway. But now we don't have to answer to how much we need or have to spend each quarter for reward and incentives. We have the flexibility to give it out when it makes sense. So for example, when a team took a pilot to GA, the general availability, we used that budget to take the entire team and all supporting functions out to celebrate. We also gave that team a monetary bonus. Now, before the experiment, we would have to justify every single spend, and we would be scrutinized by other departments that we may spend too much in fun events, or that HR would ding us for giving out bonuses and incentives outside of the HR performance management cycle.
So, Mun-Wai, we can see why you're called the troublemaker. It seems you're just willing to try anything. How did you go about keeping people on side with all this that you were doing?
So our HR BP, our HR business partner, is very smart. She knows that we're not doing what HR specifies for performance management, though we are very good at translating to what HR asks for. She also figures that we must have changed how reward and recognition was done. She saw the changes in our organization. Our people were more collaborative, they were smiling, and they thought the budget was their money instead of company money. So she got curious. She wanted to know exactly what was done to bring about those changes. When I told her, she got so excited and asked if what I've done with performance management could be replicated to the rest of the company. I told her, of course, with a few minor changes for sales and marketing folks. She proposed the changes to her boss, and her boss liked the idea. They, along with me and other leaders of the company, came up with a brand new performance management system. The most surprising thing was they emailed the entire company when it's almost time for annual performance appraisal and told the company that we won't be doing what we've always done. In fact, they abolished their own processes. Instead, they said they would like to try something different. They didn't know if that would work, but they told us the goals and would like the entire company to try it out with them and give them feedback. Wow, I have never heard any HR admitting that they don't know anything. I have also never heard HR asking company for feedback instead of just talking to the senior executives, then rolled out their programs, mandating everyone to follow their new process, whether it works for people or not. Now, HRBP told me that that's the most she could do. She can't affect company-wide reward and recognition changes, even though she likes what we're doing, because it involves finance, and she is HR.
Mm. So your experiment is now being adopted across almost the whole organization. And you've mentioned already that you're 18 months into the experiment further back. But could you take us back to that first quarter that, and in your relationship there with finance? What happened in that first quarter? How did that go? How did that go for you?
Well, our experiment worked. Our budget was balanced that first quarter. The CFO breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed the second quarter. Then he gave us our budget for the next 2 quarters. Now, throughout that year, we not only balanced the budget, we also saved company money. So when it's time for the annual corporate planning, we gave him the numbers that we would need for the following year, and he just gave it to us. Now, in the past, we all knew that if you don't use it, you lose it. So it drove people to ridiculous spends at the end of each quarter because of that mentality, or you get less budget next time around. For us, the CFO now trusts us to be responsible and that we will save money when we can. And when we can't, he trusts that we must have exhausted all avenues, and we really can't. He still asks us questions during the annual corporate planning before giving us what we asked for, but he was not asking us to justify every line item. He just needs to know on a high level how we come up with our numbers, and then he gave us what we requested for the entire year.
I mean, that's just amazing. It really is truly amazing. As you can hear, a great case study, I think, for us all to pore over, learn from, and of course, experiment with. Of course, we can see that agility and the agile mindset is permeating now the organization, not through expensive training and methodologies, expensive rollouts of scaled frameworks, but because simple and obvious changes were made in finance and HR. Because people were being rewarded for the right behavior, because they were being treated fairly and openly, and because they were being asked to report based on things which made sense, the whole department, it feels, naturally adopted an agile approach. And as you mentioned, elements of this were being rolled out to the rest of the company, and the benefits were going beyond managing the budget. Have I captured that right?
You captured it brilliantly, Alistair. I also want to point out that part of the reason I went after HR and finance is because I'm looking at the entire organization holistically instead of just one or two departments. As we all know, the company is only as agile as the least agile department. So we need to apply system thinking to respond to changes in other parts of the system and to cause a certain behavior of the system instead of just following a plan. So apply agile values to the entire organization. We also constantly inspect and adapt because solutions for yesterday's problems may not work for tomorrow's challenges. Now, it would be remiss of me if I don't mention the importance of gaining the trust, the support, the cooperation, and eventually the collaboration from the executive management team. As illustrated in my story, I gained the trust of my executive VP and the CFO first by understanding where they're coming from and what they need in order to do their jobs. Then when I came up with a different solution that would help the team while ensuring they could still do their jobs, I got their support and cooperation. Now, in the end, I got collaboration from my executive VP and even the CFO. Oh, just a side note. The CFO wanted me to help change the reward and recognition system for sales folks, including their commission plans. He was very willing to work with me to come up with a better plan and experiment. Well, at that point, I drew the line and declined his offer. Now, the job of a 21st century management is to give people the environment and support that they need and trust them to get the job done. In other words, don't hinder the team's progress. Well, which include not defining every single line item. Very often, business people hinder the progress by insisting on what they're familiar with, the established processes and plans, instead of working with the team to understand the issues and follow the problems together. When I say business people, I mean executives, finance, and HR. So business people and product development should work together throughout the project. Remember, any process drives behavior. So processes that management and leaders set up can either support or hinder your organizational agility. We may have noticed that the more successful transformations start from the top and are led by the C-suite. But do we know that the most successful transformations, which may be yet to come, will be led by the C-suite and finance and HR? Last thing I would say is start where you are, understand the problem and the outcome that you want, and find a different solution to achieve the outcome instead of just implementing a certain framework or copy other companies' models. By driving ownership and accountability down the organization, it triggers creativity of the organization to come together to find a better solution. So that when a new challenge comes, the organization has already gotten a mental process that they can apply.
Thank you, Mun-Wai. Absolutely brilliant. One thing that is clear is that this worked because you were there and because you helped people think. So effectively, single-handedly, you drove the agile transformation for your organization with your ability to influence others. And many of us are probably thinking, well, do I have a Mun-Wai in my organization? And are we prepared to give them a chance? And if that is the question that you're asking yourself, what we ask you is whether you would like help in getting started. If you'd be interested in finding out whether this approach could work for you, Mun-Wai and I can run one or more workshops for your organization to help you get started. Consider us before spending money on expensive consultants or try to run a full-blown agile transformation. As we can see from Mun-Wai's case study, a different approach might yield better, faster, and more long-lasting results at a fraction of the cost. I think every sentence in this case study deserves its own mini workshop. And Mun-Wai is already delivering workshops in the HR aspects of this. And we can help you unpick and apply the elements of the story to your organization. Thank you so much, Mun-Wai, for sharing that with us. And I think we might be going to questions.
Yeah, let's do that. And I didn't see any questions in the Slido, so there's only, since it's a few of us, why don't we just open up to the floor? If you have any questions, then either unmute yourself, shout it out, or type in the chat.
So first of all, Mun-Wai, I want to say thank you for having this conversation. It is so nice to hear what you did, for the hard work, being courageous to stand up for what you believe was the right thing to do, and to have those conversations with the right people. So thank you for that. And my question is, you mentioned something about system thinking. So can you explain or elaborate a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So when thinking about system thinking is that the entire organization is a system, right? Each of the departments is just each of the things in the system. So everything's interrelated. You change one thing, you have now ripple effects on the other things. So when I say system thinking, I'm talking about the, at least in my experience, the normal agile transformation, usually if it is a product development organization, usually starts in IT or engineering, right? And then you're like, okay, we're going to do agile. And then you will try to do whatever all these agile practices, lean or TDD and other practices. And yet, at some point you realize that you are going to hit a wall because there are other things that are driving different behaviors. For example, the performance assessment, which is focusing on individual contributions. Well, then Agile says it's a team sports, it's a team collaboration. Well, I have no incentive to help you out because I am being measured how well I personally have done. At the end of the year, when my manager talked to me, they would say, okay, now how much stuff have you worked on and have you actually accomplished? It's kind of difficult to say, well, I know I signed up for 10 things, but I only get 5 done because I was helping my teammates to get the other 15 things done. Well, yeah, but you helped them, but you weren't the one doing it. Okay, so how much have you done? Right then, now I got dinged and says, okay, well, she is a terrible worker. Now, and I don't know how familiar you're with the whole performance review
Yeah,
process.
totally agree.
And you got force ranked. And so I will be force ranked into probably the lower part of the curve. And now I will be put in the performance improvement plan because I'm such a terrible worker. Now, why would I then want to help my teammates? I mean, there's no incentive for me to do that. So I'm going to make sure that I am the one who do all the work. I'm the one who get all the glory and all the credit, and everyone knows about it. And now when my manager and I talk, we say, see, I promised 10 things. I actually did 15. Yay. I'm now superstar. You need to give me extra bonus and salary increase and all that stuff. Right? That's a wrong behavior, isn't it? And so if you realize that, then you go, okay, so what is actually stopping the team collaborate together? Is how it's incentivized. And what is the process that is driving the reward and recognition? And who are the people who are driving that? HR. All right, let's go talk to HR. Now, as you heard from my story as well, HR realizes that I have done something different in performance management. I have also done something different in reward and recognition. And when reward and recognition, it touches finance. And you heard from my story that she basically said, I'm sorry, I can only do so much because I'm only HR. I'm not finance. I cannot affect change there. And so what do? I went to finance. Now, of course, at the same time, there was something else happening that is related to finance. But regardless, that is basically the progression of, if you're looking at things from a system perspective, then you realize that all these parts are interconnected. So one thing is driving behavior for the different parts, and you need to figure it out what that is and go to that source. And once you figure that out, it's like, oh, you find out there's actually something else, and you go, you now go to the other group. So that's what I meant by system thinking. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, totally. It's brilliant, actually. So I haven't thought about all these pieces and how actually being agile and transforming an organization starts with the behaviors that we currently have. So totally agree. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm going to give another example because the one that I just gave is from an HR perspective. And let me give one from the finance perspective, because finance drives the annual corporate planning. So basically at the end of each year, the finance department will go, okay, the entire company, we're going into corporate planning for next year. And depending on the company, in one of the companies, and this is hilarious, the corporate planning started in October the previous year, and then the year after that, it started in August, and then it started in July. I'm like, you're starting earlier and earlier. And when was the budget being approved? Not until March the following year. And what did they do for that whole time? They were trying to predict what would happen in the next 12 months. And if anything changes, they have this elaborate change management process that you have to go through. You have to basically jump through hoops to actually explain to them why you actually changed from what you said you would do, like, the previous year. Is that agile? It's not, right? Because things would change very frequently. And the one thing that is constant is change. So why is the finance process, this annual corporate planning process, mandate people to say, hey, you have to do this annual corporate planning and make sure you know everything that would happen in the next 12 months. And then we will make you jump through hoops if you actually make any changes, during that year, right? That is driving wrong behavior. So why would anyone in Agile will try to say, when you say, oh, you don't have to define everything up front, we understand that change happens, and yet here's one corporate process that everyone has to adhere to, is to drive this very waterfall planning cycle of you have to define everything up front for the next 12 months. Well, obviously that's not jive, that doesn't really work. So what did I do? Of course, I went toe to toe with finance. So yes, CFO knows me very well, and the CEO knows me very well as well. But anyway, so that's another aspect of looking at why your team, usually Agile starts with the team, and it's perfectly fine, but then you will always run into problems. And a lot of times it's not necessarily the team, is they have external forces that are forcing them to behave a certain way. And you now need to understand and figure it out. What are those forces? Now go and talk to them. So I give you an example of HR. I just also gave you an example from finance, and go talk to them, because what they do affects, how agile you can be. So I hope that that helps.
Thank you. It's brilliant.
Oh, that was brilliant, Mun-Wai. Thank you so much again. It's just, I don't know if you want to just flip down to the next slide that we have there, because we can give people contact details if they want to get in touch with you and to discuss this more. But what's, again, it's just, Agile in practice. And Noemi, as you said, I think really interesting. It does take somebody with courage, but also with knowledge, and also with the right people skills to be able to go off and have those conversations and find out where people are, and then bring them along that journey. And what I love about this story, Mun-Wai, is that, all the way through, over the 18 months or so that you described what was happening, you were doing that all the way through. So thank you so much. And I don't know if there's anything else. Otherwise, very happy to hand back to our glorious ambassadors and hosts who have been looking after us today.
So actually, we do have one thing, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah.
We would actually like to have a little feedback for our session here. And so I am going to, let's see, if you go to Slido and, oops, let me actually share the right screen. Where's Slido? Here it is. So if you go to Slido, I am going to bring up a poll. And if all of you don't mind, if you can answer this question, how useful is the content to you? That would be helpful for us. Wow, thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Yay. And let me gonna ask you the next question. Would you like to learn more in a workshop? So as Alistair pointed out, that Alistair and I actually will be conducting workshops that will actually go into a lot more details, as well as giving you hands-on practices of how to actually do some of the stuff that I mentioned. So would you like to learn more in a workshop?
It seems that the voting was closed. I cannot vote.
Oh, why did I? Let me try it again. Why is it closed? Ah, there you are. Strange.
Yeah.
So sorry. Brilliant. And the last question that we have is, what is the one takeaway that you are walking away with today? Agile is for everyone. Brilliant. Is there anything else? Agile can be led by everyone in every group. Absolutely. Regardless of where you are in the organization. Absolutely.
And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that it can, a transformation like this can be done really inexpensively and uncomplicatedly if you've got the right person and the right people in there. But absolutely, being courageous is huge.
Yep. Be courageous, involve management on the agile transformation journey. Absolutely. They are not really that scary people. They're just human beings. All right. Should I wait for one more? Okay, I think that's good enough. So as Alistair said, would love to connect with you all. Here's our contact information. And thank you. That's it. I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to give it back to our wonderful host today.